Data Factory is a cloud-based data integration service that orchestrates and automates the movement and transformation of data. You can create data integration solutions by using the Data Factory service, and these solutions can ingest data from various data stores, transform or process the data, and publish the result data to data stores. The Data Factory service allows you to create data pipelines that move and transform data and then run the pipelines on a specified schedule, be it hourly, daily, or weekly. It can ingest data from various data sources, preparing, transforming, and analyzing the data, and then it can publish ready-to-use data for consumption. It also provides rich visualizations to display the lineage and dependencies between your data pipelines and monitor all your data pipelines from a single, unified view to easily pinpoint issues and set up monitoring alerts. In a Data Factory solution, you create one or more data pipelines. And a pipeline is a logical grouping of activities, and they are used to group activities into a unit that together perform a task. Activities define the actions to perform on your data. For example, you may use a copy activity to copy data from one data store to another data store. Similarly, you may use a Hive activity, which runs a Hive query on an Azure HD Insight cluster to transform or analyze your data. Data Factory supports two types of activities: data movement activities and data transformation activities. Let's now take a look at each of these activity types. The copy activity in Data Factory copies data from a source data store to a sink data store. Data Factory supports numerous data stores. Data from any source can be written to any sink. Let's take a look then at the Azure data stores. Azure Blob Storage, Azure Data Lake Store, Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Data Warehouse, Azure Table Storage, and Azure Document DB. These are all supported sources. They are also supported sinks in addition to the Azure Search Index. For data movement activities for databases, here is the list of supported stores, including SQL Server and other popular database products. Note that most sources can be on-premises or in an Azure VM, and this would require you to install the Data Management Gateway. Notably, SQL Server and Oracle are the only two that are supported as sinks. For file data movements, we have this list of 4, all supported as sources, and the file system only supported as a sink. Again, data stores can be on-premises or in an Azure VM, and the Data Management Gateway can then be used to communicate between on-premises and the cloud. Finally, for data movement to other stores, including this list here, supported only as sources, not as sinks. Data Factory supports numerous transformation activities that can be added to pipelines either individually or chained with another activity. Note that you can use a MapReduce activity to run Spark programs on your HD Insight Spark cluster, and you can also create a custom activity to run R scripts on your HD Insight cluster with R installed. Lastly, if you need to move data to or from a data store that the copy activity doesn't support, or transform data by using your own logic, you can create a custom .NET activity. Linked services define the information needed for Data Factory to connect to external resources. Examples include Azure Storage and on-premises SQL Server databases. Linked services are used for two purposes in Data Factory: to represent a data store including but not limited to an on-premises SQL Server, Oracle database file share, or an Azure Blob Storage account, or to represent a compute resource that can host the execution of an activity. For example, the HD Insight Hive activity runs on an HD Insight Hadoop cluster. Link services link data stores to an Azure Data Factory. And datasets represent data structures within the data stores. For example, an Azure Storage linked service provides connection information for Data Factory to connect to an Azure Storage account. Similarly, An Azure SQL linked service provides connection information for an Azure SQL database, and an Azure SQL dataset specifies the table that contains the data. Data Factory has a few key entities that work together to define input and output data, processing events, and the schedule and resources required to execute the desired data flow. This diagram shows the relationships between dataset, activity, pipeline, and linked service. Let's now see an example of how the data flow concepts fit together. Consider a business scenario which accumulates core log files and also stores customer data in an on-premises data mart. These two sources are stored in Azure Data Lake. Azure HD Insight uses Pig to cleanse, transform, and combine the data and then output customer call details to the data lake. Azure Machine Learning is used to predict customer churn and then output the results to the data lake, whereupon Azure Data Factory is engaged to load the results into Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Power BI is then used to visualize and analyze the customer churn data in a dashboard. The core log files and the on-premises customer table are datasets. The Hadoop Pig job and the machine learning predictions are activities, and the sequence of activities represent a pipeline. This data flow can be described in terms of data sources, ingestion, transformations and analysis, and finally, publication. Currently, you can create data factories in the following three regions: West US, East US, and North Europe. Note that a data factory can access data stores and compute services in other Azure regions, possibly to move data between data stores or process data by using compute services. Data Factory itself does not store any data. It lets you create data-driven flows to orchestrate movement of data between supported data stores and processing of data by using compute services in other regions or in an on-premises environment. It also lets you monitor and manage workflows by using both programmatic and UI mechanisms. Even though Azure Data Factory is available in only 3 regions, the service powering the data movement in Data Factory is available globally in several regions. In case the data store sits behind a firewall, then a data management gateway can be installed on premises environments to move data instead. Finally, this presentation concludes with some useful resources for further information.